Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video, and I want to talk about something today that's different than what we normally talk about. It's not about a feature, it's not about a practice or a type of knife. Today I want to talk about something that hopefully you've already thought through. If you're watching this video because you're a knife guy and you already carry a knife every day, I hope that you've already given some thought to this subject, but I want to talk about a knife as a defensive weapon, okay? And I think there may be some of you out there who watch this, who may watch this and say, I primarily carry a knife as a defensive weapon. That's my main purpose for carry. And, you know, although I can understand that to a certain extent, there are a couple things I want to say. Number one is in Canada, it's illegal to carry anything as a weapon, okay? You can't carry a pencil and say, hey, I'm carrying this, you know, to use as a weapon to defend my life or whatever, all right? Now there is a bit of an aside here where I would like to point out that number one, it is possible for a license to be issued to carry a weapon for defensive purposes, a gun or something else. Those licenses are issued obviously primarily to police officers, to certain types of security workers, or armored truck drivers or other things like that. You have to be able to show that to carry out your role, to carry out your job, or some major factor in your life, that your life is in imminent danger on a regular basis, to be able to issue that license. And they're very rarely issued to regular citizens who aren't engaged in some kind of practice like that. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, the same rules apply though to those people, a police officer or someone else who uses either a gun or a knife or anything else. If you use a weapon in a defensive situation, if you use something as a weapon in a defensive situation, you have to prove that it was reasonable force, okay? So if a police officer shoots someone, they have to demonstrate my life was directly threatened. The only recourse that I had available was to shoot this person, and you as a citizen are bound by the same law, the same jurisprudence, if you will, that a police officer is governed by. All right, so that's the first thing to get out of the way. The other element that I want to point out here is that there is a legitimate need for, or there is a legitimate cause to carry a weapon against animals, wild animals or domestic animals. I used to do a lot of running. Now I don't do as much, but when I did, one of the things that you would often encounter were dogs, especially in the country, that were allowed to run free and may present a problem. For that purpose, you can carry a number of different things. A lot of people, in places where it's a real problem or where there are other animals to be worried about, people carry an extendable baton. That's legal to carry in Canada, as long as, again, it's not to be used on a person. Anyway, so the point is, and by the way, that has happened to me at least 2 times, that I have been attacked by a dog and kind of wished I had something with which to dissuade this animal. Again, though, this kind of serves to add my point, to make the point in this video. And this is where we'll start specifically discussing a knife as a weapon. Okay, if you're carrying it for that reason, I need you to think carefully about that, okay? Number one, because in those situations where a dog came at me, a knife would not necessarily have been much good. If I've got a knife out here in this hand, by the time I use the knife on that animal, I've probably already taken a bite or 2. And if it's a big dog, and if it's a determined dog, they've gone into full, attack mode, the knife may not have the stopping power to remedy that situation. And that would be even more the case if you're dealing with a bear or a cougar or something else. And I know, I've read the story too, there are stories where hikers have defended themselves against a mountain lion with a pocket knife. They already suffered severe damage though, and you could die from the damage already sustained, because the animal has to get that close to you that you can use a knife on it. It probably has already bitten you, scratched you, whatever, gored you if it's a buffalo or something. Okay, so let's get into some of the things, some of the considerations that need to be given to carrying a knife as a defensive weapon. Okay, number one is stopping power. When we talk about defending our lives, we want the attack to end. Okay, that's the goal. We want to stop this person from being able to harm me or my family, so that everyone can go back to being safe. Okay, a knife, it may do that. Now, it may do that just by branching. You take a knife out and you say, hey, I've got a knife, you need to back off, okay? Now, one of the things, you know, if you have a knife like this, they may go, that's not a knife, that's a knife, right? You may get into one of those Indiana Jones situations. Here would be a larger knife designed more for a combat situation. Still a great utility knife as well, by the way. But anyway, let's say you pull this knife out and you say, hey, I've got a knife and I don't want to use it. I want this to be resolved amicably. Let's back off and let's not do this. Okay, so maybe that dissuades someone. Okay, and that's great. If that's not going to work and you're going to have to use this now to cut or stab another human being, you need to understand that the kind of damage a knife does is fairly clean. Okay, it's fairly easy. You know, a knife cuts flesh fairly easily, and that person, if they're drunk, or if they're, you know, stoned, if they've taken some drugs, even if they're extremely angry, that knife slash or stab, it may not stop them. Okay, and so you may stab someone with a knife, and you've got to literally wait for them to lose enough blood from that wound that they're now weakened. That could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, could be an hour. All right. So using a knife as a defensive weapon, one of the things you have to think about is how much damage can you do with it, and is that going to be sufficient damage to stop an attack? Because in a lot of cases it may not be. Okay, and I would say, again, that's even more the case with a wild animal, but with a human being, same deal. Okay, so there's not a lot of stopping power with a knife, even if it's used multiple times. You know, there are stories of people getting stabbed with a knife in a fight or getting cut badly in a fight and not realizing until the fight's over. Okay, so that's number one. Stopping power is a consideration. There may be other things that are available to you, and I'll get that when I talk about other options. Reach is another consideration. Okay, if I've got something like this, my reach is extremely limited, right? Obviously this is going to be a little better. This is not my knife, by the way, it's here for sharpening, but I thought I'd use it for the video. My reach is going to be better now, but I would prefer to have a gun where my reach is like a good distance and I can keep this person well away from me, right? And I don't have to worry about that. My Ferox, again, reach is definitely an issue with this knife. The other thing you have to realize is in a combat situation, you could hurt yourself. Okay, you've got something like this, and you're in a grappling situation, and man, now you get your arm instead of their arm, or this falls and gets trapped between your body and their body, and it gets pushed into you instead of them. All right, so you have to consider those things as well. When you talk about reach, you talk about getting two bodies in close proximity to one another. There are some other elements that need to be considered, okay, about blade control. And that's a training issue that if you haven't ever had any kind of training, you may not have even contemplated. Okay, what about damage and taking life? Okay, how much damage am I going to do with this weapon? And you're now in a lethal situation. So this knife is every bit as dangerous as a gun. And you need to consider that this is now the use of lethal force. You're going to kill someone to end this situation. Okay, maybe not, right? Maybe the fight stops. You call 911, an ambulance comes and takes them away, and everything's fine. But still, that's assault with a deadly weapon, and you're going to go to court, and you're going to have to defend yourself against that assault with a deadly weapon charge. All right. Now, by the way, I've been told, I have a friend who's a cop, and he pointed out that even if you have a folding knife in your pocket and you get into a physical altercation with someone, let's say you get in a fist fight, you could be charged with assault with a deadly weapon because that's on your person. Okay, so kind of keep that in the back of your mind as well. Finally, if both of you have a knife, if you're in a knife fight, and this is kind of the last part of the practical considerations about a real fight. If you're in a knife fight, you need to know that the chances are that you may get cut as well. And sometimes it becomes a battle of attrition. That is, who bleeds out the fastest. And there are lots of stories about people who got in duels, you know, back when dueling with swords was the way to work out your problems, where although the one person was declared the winner of the duel, ultimately they both died due to the injuries sustained. Okay, so again, You need to be very aware of all of those things if you're thinking, hey, I'm carrying this knife as a defensive weapon. All right. Now, there are some other situations. I think most of us, or I think most people who do this think, I'm going to be walking down the street and someone's going to try to mug me. I'm going to be driving in my car and someone's going to try to carjack me, or, you know, I'm going to be at the park or whatever, you know, and a crazy person tries to assault my family. Those situations, okay, but consider now other defensive situations. Maybe you're in a wilderness situation. You know, maybe what you need is a defensive tool against wild animals, or against, you know, against someone who's going to take your stuff or do you harm where you're not in an urban environment. Again, I think there are other options that need to be considered. And how about a home defense situation? I think, again, a knife is probably a poor choice in those situations. I think even if let's say you're out in the woods, you're camping, and you think, hey, there could be wild animals here, you're probably better off to use your knife and make a spear. Okay, use your knife as a tool, as a cutting tool, make a spear to defend yourself from fill in the blank, right? The cougars or bears or wolves or whatever else you're scared of out in the wilderness. If you watch the TV show Alone on History Channel, great show, but you see the bears become a real problem there, okay? So in a home invasion situation, you probably have all kinds of things in your house that are going to be better options, or going to be a better option than a knife. It could be a chair, it could be a walking stick, it could be an umbrella, okay, a brick, you know, something you can throw and keep an assailant at a fair distance. And of course, if you're watching this video and you're interested in knives, you may own a gun, okay, and so obviously that's going to be your best home defense option. Now, when you think about that, I'm not suggesting you store guns or ammo illegally, but I can tell you that if I needed to, I happen to know that I can get access to a firearm and ammunition pretty quickly if I really, really need to, okay? So all of those things I think are important to consider when using a knife, when thinking about a knife as a defensive weapon. One more thing that you probably want to think about, and that is, what about other options? Okay, and here's where I want to say to you, if you're carrying a knife, you probably should think of it primarily as a tool rather than as a weapon. The reality is, a knife does not make a great weapon, especially in some kind of physical altercation. There are all kinds of things. If someone had this in their hand and you said, okay, your opponent has this SOG Seal Pup Elite, what are you going to take? I mean, I'd take a baseball bat, I'd take a stick, I'd take a pair of nunchucks, obviously I'd take a gun, you know, there are all kinds of things. A chair, okay? There are all kinds of things that I would take over that knife. A crowbar, you know, a Wonder Bar, you know, a hammer, right? Because all of those things, number one, I can deal with the knife. One swat and the knife is gone. A second swat and my assailant is down, right? A knife, who knows if I'm going to miss, you know, and if I do stab him, now I've got to get close enough. He or she could stab me in return, okay? So think about alternate options. If you really, really need a defensive weapon, okay, maybe you should be calling the police and reporting that, hey, I'm in this situation, my neighborhood is so dangerous that I can't go out, or something like that. If you are in a situation where you really feel the need for a defensive weapon with you at all times, probably a knife is not your best bet. Maybe a gun would be better. Probably a gun would be better. A baseball bat, a walking stick. You know, get a walking stick and carry it and just walk with it everywhere you go. It's just a walking stick. I just use it for stability, but if you needed it, it's there, right? So I think there are other options where if you're really in that dire situation, I don't know if I would pick a knife as my first choice anyway. Now, all of this, you have to say, as a last-ditch effort, right? It's the only thing I've got available. Someone's going to kill me or my children. Yes, I'm going to use any possible thing that I have. You know, I might pick up a brick and throw it and then pull the knife out. And if I drop the knife, I'm going to use my feet. I'm going to use my teeth. I'm going to use my fists. I'm going to use my elbows or knees or any other thing that I can use to stop someone who's seriously intent on hurting myself or my family. Okay, that's the reality of it. Now, one other note about this, if you do have a knife and you're a person who's of small stature, okay, maybe you're a female in gender, maybe you're a child, maybe you're an elderly person, probably taking out your knife and saying, hey, back off, I've got a knife, is not the best option. okay, it's very possible that that knife ends up used on you. Even if you do injure the person initially, a person who's been cut one time may be able to, if they're much stronger than you, grab that hand and put it into you, okay? So you have to think about that as well, and it really may not be the best choice to use a knife, or if you do use a knife, as one person has said, it may be that that knife needs to only be felt and never seen, okay? What I mean by that is a knife used as a weapon should only be used in such a way that that person doesn't know you have a knife as a weapon until it's too late and they're now bleeding out on the floor, okay? And I know that's scary to even think about, but the reality is, if you don't use it that way, if you choose to try and dissuade an attacker with a knife, that attacker is much, much larger than you, it could end up going even worse than it would have if you didn't have it, all right? So keep all of that in mind. In conclusion, of course, what I'd like to point out is I think it's a great idea to carry a knife. I obviously like knives. You've seen how many I've got just here for this video. I think it's a great tool to have. I strongly recommend people carry one with them all the time, everywhere they go, because there are constantly needs that require a knife, and not all of them are. In fact, 99.9% of the time, that knife is just going to be a handy tool. Now, 1%, 0.01% of the time, it may be that that knife is used to rescue yourself or someone else from a deadly situation. That may not necessarily be an assault. It could be a car accident. Okay, it could be tangled underwater. It could be all kinds of situations where you need to extricate yourself from some situation, and a knife is necessary to do that. And now, even a smaller fraction of the time, it may be that this is a last-ditch effort at self-defense, okay? So when you think about using a knife as a weapon, you need to kind of think through a lot of things, okay? Most especially the fact that if you ever to say that, your knife will be taken away. If a police officer stops you and says, hey, I see you're carrying a knife, why are you doing that? And you say, this is a self-defense tool, they're going to say, thank you very much, I'll take that knife. Because you are not allowed to carry anything as a weapon. You're not allowed to carry anything for self-defense. And the philosophical, rightness or wrongness of that law is not the subject of this video, even though I do disagree with that from a philosophical standpoint. Okay, so there you go, guys. In conclusion, I think you need to pick a knife that works for you as a tool that you're going to carry with you all the time, and it's of the right size and of the right shape, has the right blade length and the right blade style, that it does the things that you need it to do on a daily basis. Okay, if you are in a situation where you really need a defensive weapon, there are other things out there that probably would serve you better. And you just need to be aware of the legality of that. And probably it's time to, if you seriously need a weapon to defend your life, it's probably time to call law enforcement anyway. All right. Now, last thing is to say that if you're in the U.S., things are very different there. Okay. Canadian laws, we don't have anything resembling a castle law. We don't have a concealed carry permit available. In fact, handguns can never be carried for any reason except for going to the range to shoot at the range and then home. Okay. I want to put that all out there. If you're watching this and you're in the US, probably a lot of the comments that you would make won't be applicable. If you are in Canada, though, I'd love to hear your take on some of this, maybe an experience you've had, maybe a situation you know about. I know there have been some in the news in the last couple of years. All right, so there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that gave you some things to think about, and of course let you see some cool knives. We had there a SOG Steel Pup, we had an SE3, we had an SE Azula, Cold Steel, Voyager, BK11, and a Ferrum Forge Ferex. All of these are knives I have EDC'd. Oh no, the SOG I haven't EDC'd, only in the bush. But all of these other knives are knives I have EDC'd and could be on my person or on your person when something bad happens. So that's why they were here for examples. Hope you enjoyed the video. Love to hear your comments, and we will talk to you soon.